Hello everyone, Gammon here. And I sure do love chocolate. What type of chocolate do I love? Why, deep, dark, bitter chocolate, with lots of cocoa grown in the deep, dense jungles of the Amazon and milk squeezed from only the most neutral of Swiss cows. Or at least that's what most people will say, but people say a lot of stuff. If you looked at the chocolate I eat, or the chocolate most people eat and buy, you'll find most of it isn't dark or bitter at all. It's cheap store brand chocolate that is very, very sweet. You see, my lovely audience? People lie. They'll say one thing and then do the other, and this extends far beyond chocolate. So, how do you know what people really think, what they really want? You check out what they spend their time and money on. So, despite most people saying they prefer bitter chocolate, by looking at their real spending habits, you'll see that they actually prefer to buy sweet chocolate. This new preference is called their revealed preference because it was hidden by what they were saying, but revealed by their actions. Neat concept, right?
And now for something completely different.
Boy, I sure do hate crunch. Don't you hate crunch? The type of game I love is the type that is completely crunch free, where each and every single developer sat in a golden toilet. Not gold plated, pure gold toilet. Each meal was a feast, and every day the finest prostitutes from whatever place is famous for its prostitutes were imported to give devs head and tell them they're good boys and girls. This is what most people will say. Okay, no, this is not what most people will say. I was trying to be funny. But when asked about crunch, most people will say they oppose it. However, words are cheap. What do they really prefer? To find that out, we are going to be looking at two games, Apex and Fortnite. These two games are pretty similar. They're both battle royale games, they're both free to play, and they both make money via microtransactions and a battle pass. In order to make sure that they have enough silly dances and hats to keep their audience engaged, Epic crunches the ever-loving shit out of their employees. Multiple articles have come out talking about just how poor the working conditions in Epic are, with some employees describing work weeks between 70 to 100 hours. Some people also claiming that they were let go for refusing to work weekends. While this most probably harms overall productivity and crushes work morale as well as the employee's soul, it also allows Fortnite to remain competitive and churn out the sheer volume of content necessary to keep their audience logging in. And make no mistake, when it comes to live service games, what you need is a lot of volume. Quantity is imperative. Quality is nice, but quantity is a must. On the flip side, Apex Legends is developed by Respawn, and Respawn don't do no crunch. Or at least that's what they said as an explanation for why they're doing their updates in a seasonal fashion. Because of this, people must be flocking to Apex, right? Finally, a studio that treats its developers well. That's what we all said we wanted. This is what we really prefer, right? That means people have stayed loyal to Apex, despite them having significantly less content than Fortnite, right? Right? Oh. There are other differences other than crunch between Apex and Fortnite. For instance, Apex has different classes and no building, but overall these two games are similar enough to compare, and I don't think it's anything gameplay related that killed Apex's growth and allowed Fortnite to regain the #1 spot. What caused this was probably them not releasing updates fast enough to fix vital problems with the game, like hitboxes and netcode problems in a timely fashion. They also couldn't provide enough content to keep their audience engaged, and they didn't price that content well. When you're running a live service game, what you need is to constantly bring out more and more things to keep your players busy. This can be anything from balance updates to new modes to special events or even just cosmetics. But you need to give the player a reason to keep playing the game and logging in every day. You want them to stay engaged and to continue using your live service. That's why quantity is a must. Every new thing you release is just one more reason for the person to stay interested and log in. But it goes further than that. The amount of content you release is also going to be tied to your pricing. In a recent event, Apex released a bunch of cosmetic items, each being sold at around $7, or $14 if you want to avoid loot boxes. Even if we ignore the loot box part of the event, the amount of money you have to pay per item seems incredibly steep, and then taking certain items and putting them behind a $200 paywall also seems like a ripoff. Probably because it is a ripoff. So why are Apex selling such overpriced cosmetics? Well, because they have to. Apex needs to meet a specific earnings goal every quarter, and to do that, they need you to buy cosmetic items. Because they don't use crunch, there's only so many items they can make. This limits their supply, driving the price of each item up. If they had more cosmetics to sell you, they could drive the price of each individual item down and still make the same, if not more, money. When you see people aren't spending money on your game, it's not because they're freeloaders. It's because you haven't offered them something that they consider to be worth the price of purchase. Oftentimes, the same person that refuses to buy one cosmetic item for $7 will happily pay $100 to buy 50 cosmetic items. What people are actually complaining about is that they're not getting their money's worth. And the reason for the exorbitant prices is because Apex just doesn't have the quantity of cosmetics needed to meet projections if they give their items reasonable prices. Again, the problem is quantity. I cannot stress enough how needed quantity is in live service games. The thing is, when people feel like they're getting their money's worth, that what they're buying has value or is worth the price, they will actually beg you to take their money. And that's not even an over-exaggeration. Just look at the Dota 2 subreddit during its Battle Pass, or as we call it, Compendium, and all of the people begging Valve to hurry up and release more loot boxes because they really want to buy them. The unwillingness to use crunch seems to be at the root of most of Apex's problems. It's why they can't create the volume of product needed to keep Apex competitive with Fortnite, and it's probably not a problem they could have avoided. When you have a breakout hit, and that's exactly what Apex was, a completely gigantic breakout hit, odds are your team won't be big enough in order to keep up with demand, so you're going to have to use crunch. And to anyone thinking EA is greedy and should have just thrown money at the problem, yes, EA is very greedy, but it's not that simple. Most companies, no matter how rich they are, have most of their money tied up in many investments and projects. No matter how big your net worth is, to throw money at a problem, what you need is liquidity. And most companies tend to invest as much of their money as possible in order to get a return on that money, instead of, just letting it rot in the bank, meaning the money is tied up in other ongoing projects. In other words, in order for them to throw money at Apex, they have to take it away from one of their other ongoing projects, which could mean either crippling or just completely canceling that project, which is not something I think anyone wants. However, even if EA had all of their money, just sitting in the bank, ready to be spent, none of that matters when what you really need is time. Money can't buy time. Onboarding is hard and it's time consuming. It can take months to find a good candidate, and even after you found the candidate and finished the hiring process, you still have to train him. You can only train so many people at one time, and even after training and orientation finished, the new employees will be somewhat dependent on your already overworked and overstressed current employees. So at times, new hires can actually make it harder to get the job done instead of easier, at least for the first few months before they get their shit together. And the same is true for outsourcing. While yes, it's true that overall productivity diminishes because of crunch, you are able to get more out of your employees for a very short period of time. Hopefully enough time for you to bring in and train enough people that can actually help you. Money can't buy time, and when time is the problem and you need results right now, and I mean right now, you're probably going to have to resort to crunch. Now, let me make something clear. This isn't me defending crunch. I've had to do it personally at my job multiple times. My longest period of crunch was me having to work about 66 hours a week, every week for 3 months, more or less. And I can tell you it was not a fun experience. You have absolutely no free time, you have no personal time, you can't see your friends, you can't see your family, you can barely cook your own food. You're living in a weird-ass, kinda hazy dream where all you do is sleep, wake up, work, and then sleep again, with using most of your weekend to do chores. Crunch is very much evil. However, sometimes it's a necessary evil. What personally kills me when I hear about the crazy amount of overtime people working in the video game industry's pull is hearing about how long they're doing it for. That 3 month period I talked about was definitely an edge case. I usually have at most 2 to 3 weeks of crunch time a year. Crunch should be a matter of weeks, at worst a couple of months. Some people in video games work in a crunch environment for years, and there's absolutely no excuse for that. But more than that, what drives me crazy is hearing about people working unpaid overtime, like in Anthem. There's absolutely no way you should work overtime and then not get compensated for it. If somebody asks you to do that, tell them to go fuck themselves and find a new job. Also, I'm not saying you're going to have to crunch to make any game, just live services. You can absolutely make any single player game you want without crunching. You're probably going to end up crunching anyway, but you can do it without crunching. However, with live services, the sheer amount of content you're going to need to continue to deliver post-launch is going to more or less force you to crunch for probably months after the game was released if the game became incredibly successful. And if you don't like that, then don't make live service games. But you know what? I'm getting sidetracked. Crunch is obviously bad, and sadly, sometimes it's necessary, because without it, you can end up losing your advantage to a company that's willing to use it. So what does this tell us about the real preference, the revealed preference, of gamers? My interpretation of the data is that a development studio's working conditions are not something most gamers care about. The only thing they actually care about is the quality of the game. Apex and Fortnite aren't the only example of this. Another recent one is Borderlands 3, a game that probably sold a couple of million units. It's kind of hard to tell, they're sort of fudging the numbers, but it definitely sold at least a couple of million, despite the man in charge, Randy Pitchford, allegedly physically assaulting his employees and stealing their retirement funds. There's this tendency online to scream about how developers have to be treated better and get better conditions, only to 5 minutes later go out and buy a game that was created by a studio who treated its developers like shit. Some people have justified this by saying they'll be punishing the employees that worked on the game if they don't go out and buy it. This is kind of absurd because the people making the money off of game sales are the heads of the dev studio and the publishers, the people who did the crunching, not the people who were crunched. Overall, it's just incredibly hypocritical, and that's the thing that annoys me most about it. If you honestly care about devs, don't buy games from studios where the working conditions are shit. Which, by the way, probably means you can't buy video games, like any video game, including indies. And if you don't, if all you care about is whether the game is good or not, which is perfectly fine, by the way, that's all I care about, and it's not your responsibility as a consumer to worry about someone else's working conditions. So yeah, if all you care about is whether the game is good or not, then before you put up a video talking about how bad crunch is, or write an article, or share stuff around on social media about how we have to do more for the developers and this is unacceptable, stop for just one moment and think, is this really what I want? Or is this just me showing the world what a good person I am, and then going back to a dark, cozy corner where nobody can see me and shamefully eat that sweet, sweet chocolate?
So how do those dreaded SJWs factor into this?
What?